Thank you very much for joining us here today. My name is Rob Russell. I'm here representing Rackspace and Rackspace Managed Security. I'm here today to talk to you about navigating your route to cloud securely. So Rackspace have identified 4 key challenges for adopting the cloud securely. That's cybersecurity regulation, cloud security, legacy hardware, and the cybersecurity skills gap, which we're all very familiar with. So starting from the very beginning here, we're all well aware of the stricter data regulations that are coming in on May the 25th. So with regard to GDPR, as many of you will already know, it's more than just a checklist. It very much differs from the PCI DSS that we're all very used to, in the way that it's not very prescriptive. It doesn't work so much as a checklist. For instance, PCI DSS references the use and adoption of antivirus, whereas GDPR isn't as specific as that. There's no kind of prescriptive technologies laid out within the GDPR apart from encryption, and the ambiguity of the language contains things like appropriate controls or kind of state-of-the-art technology, which has made it a little bit of a headache for IT departments to keep up with, or necessarily kind of trying to make themselves compliant when it comes to May the 25th. So it's also distracting from the NIST directive, which is coming in at a similar time. So a lot of organizations are spending an awful lot of time preparing their businesses and preparing the way they store, process and protect data in line with GDPR. However, it's taking a lot of attention away from the NIST directive. So the next challenge would be cloud security. So organizations, businesses, SMBs, enterprise remain concerned when it comes to the cloud. They see the cloud as a kind of arena whereby they don't have that full control over their data or where it's stored, which is the kind of opposite can be proved to be the case. So when adopting the cloud, organizations have to have a cloud-centric mentality. Now, that's not just a buzzword. What does that actually mean? It means when you're migrating your information systems to the cloud, particularly security, you have to do that with a cloud-centric mentality, meaning it's not so much of a lift and shift mentality. What works outside of the cloud in your legacy environments won't necessarily work within the cloud. To give you an example of this, Rackspace Managed Security have had to develop a technology called auto-scaling, whereby the Rackspace Managed Security service will be auto-scaled into environments as they're spun up within the cloud, leaving no kind of shadow IT not protected by the monitoring service that we provide. So Rackspace, as we continue towards and beyond May the 25th, we're continuing to educate our customers with regard to GDPR. We've recently onboarded a partner, Xena Consulting, with regard to providing a gap analysis or a kind of readiness assessment if you're in the beginning of your GDPR journey. If that's of interest to you, please do come along to our stand and have a one-to-one session with us today, because we'd very much like to meet you and also kind of support you on your journey to being GDPR ready. So the next challenge we've got is legacy hardware. That comes with its own costs. It's something that we're all used to. We all have the in-house expertise to kind of monitor and patch our firewalls. However, legacy hardware is very expensive in the way of acquiring, maintaining, supporting, and also hiring the skills in order to maintain those systems. We're all well aware of the kind of the security concerns that come with legacy systems as well. Some legacy systems cannot be patched. Some legacy systems cannot be updated. We've all seen the torment that the NHS have had with this, and also industrial systems. So last year we saw a great deal of disruption caused by bad actors and kind of malware that kind of targets these legacy systems in the way of Spectre and Meltdown. They were the main ones that made the news last year, and they caused an awful lot of disruption, and that was based on legacy systems. So we're also having a challenge with the cybersecurity skills gap. So it's predicted by 2021 there will be over 2 million unfilled cybersecurity roles. And just take that into consideration, 2 million unfilled cybersecurity roles. This is one of the reasons why a lot of organizations are reaching out to managed service providers to help them kind of mitigate this gap in the market for skills. Because it's not just skills that people require, it's experience. And this is kind of emphasized in the security space. whereby you can go out and you can get someone with the skills, the necessary skills, and they've got the training, but it doesn't necessarily mean they have the experience. So yes, and that's coming down to the 24/7 operations. When it comes to GDPR, one of the most poignant questions I ask organisations is: if you were breached last thing on a Friday, would you be in the position first thing on Monday to be able to provide the independent commissioners' offices with all the details laid out within the breach notification form? What data was accessed by a bad actor? What data they may have exfiltrated from your environment? And so on and so on. So a lot of organisations don't have that 24/7/365 capability in-house, so they're reaching out to managed service providers to fulfil those duties. So let's go down to the key point. So if I had £1 for every time someone mentioned GDPR in this show today, I think I'd be a millionaire. But if I had another £1 for every time they mentioned May the 25th, I'd probably be a billionaire. However, I'll take you through this very quickly, because I'm sure many of the points also at the moment resonate with you, and you're fully aware of these details. So GDPR kicks in on May the 25th. That's this year. That's 45 days from today, people. It's not a lot of time for us to get our ships together. Processing or storing of personal data of an EU citizen, regardless of their location. This concerns citizens in the European Union and their data, regardless of where their data is being processed. It affects 3 people specifically: controllers, processors, and subjects. But the GDPR legislation has come in to empower data subjects, to empower these people to be in control, and the ones in control of their data. There is no one-size-fits-all solution for GDPR. Unfortunately, many people talk about silver bullets, and a lot of organisations through their marketing activity, I've seen quite a recent one on LinkedIn, have said built in GDPR, and there's about 57 comments underneath of people absolutely going after this organisation for saying the complete 100% solution for GDPR. As we're all aware, the GDPR legislation is very ambiguous, and we recommend to customers take a pragmatic approach to GDPR. Rackspace Managed Security can support you in some of the details laid out within the legislation, but not all of them. So it's important to understand that you will not get that one partner that help you with across the board. So when it comes to breach notification, that's one of the areas that we at Rackspace Managed Security can help you with. So come May the 25th, if you have been breached and you, upon discovery of that breach, you'll have 72 hours to notify the Independent Commissioner's Office or relevant authority as to where you're situated, as to the extent of the breach and the details of the breach. The breach notification form has been released for a couple of months now, so it kind of falls on your organisational ability to understand what information needs to be provided to the ICO in the event of a breach. However, the majority of it is around the details of the breach, the details of the data that has been exfiltrated, and the areas within your environment that the perpetrators kind of had access to at the time. So I won't go too much into the FUD at the end there, because a lot of it's quite scary. So we're all well aware of the fines that are up to 20 million euros, or 4% of global turnover, whichever is greater. The Tesco breach that happened last year, I believe it was June last year, I did a little bit of calculation on a LinkedIn post I did on there, and I think it was around £2 billion if that breach had happened after May the 25th and they were found liable and not necessarily complying to the details laid out in GDPR. So it's an awful lot of money that people are talking about. But one of the main the biggest impacting areas of GDPR and the Independent Commissioner's Office specifically is that's not the most scary thing. The Independent Commissioner's Office will have the ability to draw the blinds down as you use it with an organisation for processing data. They can actually seize your data set. And so for a lot of organisations, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, what vertical you're in, data is key to every single business out there, whether you're a small, medium-sized or enterprise business. So data is really the lifeblood running through the brains of organisation at the moment. So it's key to remember that if you find negligible of the GDPR legislation, that they'll have the power to seize that data set, which is, I think, more scary than any fine that they can release. So as I've mentioned before, as you're walking around the show today, beware of GDPR snake oil. Beware of those silver bullets. You may find marketing ploys in order to make you believe that there's some kind of holistic answer to GDPR. However, as mentioned previously, it's important to take a pragmatic approach and work with the partners that will be able to help you fulfill those individual articles, because there's 99 of them, and there's no single stand in this show today that will help you with every single 99 article contained within the legislation. So how can Rackspace help? So I'm from Rackspace Managed Security, and we have a series of solutions whereby they're technical solutions. They're not organizational or anything to do with the people. But however, it starts with data encryption. Data encryption is the only technology mentioned within the GDPR legislation. It's quite fascinating. The reason for this kind of ambiguous nature or ambiguity within the legislation itself is that technology is moving so rapidly and adoption is so fast that anyone could ever predict that if they were to be more prescriptive of the technology contained within the GDPR, then it would be outdated months after the GDPR is released. And so if they were to come out and say and be a lot more prescriptive, then they say they'll have the encryption, these particular types of encryption in place, these particular types of monitoring capability in place, then technology moves so quickly, and the legislation would have to be rewritten within weeks or months of the legislation being released. So coming back to data encryption, Rackspace Managed Security have a service which is called Privacy and Data Protection. We like our acronyms like any IT company, so we call it PDP. I think there's TMA in our industry, too many acronyms. However, the managed encryption service is based on the volumetric technology, and it's a fully managed end-to-end encryption service. So we're managing that key rotation for you, and ultimately, if you'd like more information on the Privacy and Data Protection service, please do come to our stand, which is about 15 meters from this stand here, and come and have a discussion with us about that. But that kind of appeals to the appropriate controls that are laid out within GDPR as well, and state-of-the-art technology. So that's the highly experienced security operations team. They're leveraging the best-of-breed technology. So as a managed service, obviously we're going to be using technology, and that's constantly reviewed. That's reviewed every 3 months within Rackspace Managed Security to make sure we're using the most efficient and effective technology that's out there in the marketplace. One of the main features of Rackspace Managed Security is the human enrichment, and we're all well aware of the kind of value of human enrichment within security. There's only so much that tools can pick up. Tools can pick up on what they know, such as antivirus, using list-based technology of signatures. If a technology hasn't seen it before, such as a zero-day attack, and we're all familiar with the statistic that 75% of breaches involve a zero-day attack, zero-day malware, then it's very important to have highly trained individuals scanning your environment. So Rackspace Managed Security take a very proactive approach to monitoring our customers' environments, whereby every 24 hours, a security operations professional goes out within your environment and scans for not just anomalous activity, but suspicious activity, such as escalation of privileges, such as the containerization or the reduction of data being prepared to be exfiltrated from your network. All of the things are kind of indicators as to a breach may be just about to occur. So what Rackspace Managed Security does is try to close the gap on the attacker's life cycle. You'll all be familiar with the attacker's life cycle. So we're all aware that an attacker's most valuable asset is time. So as a security operations center, it's all about reducing the amount of time that they have within your environment to reduce the amount of damage that they can do. So that's the cyber hunting. With regard to the remediation, when we onboard a customer to Rackspace Managed Security, we'll have a very kind of one-to-one business level discussion with regard to a series of pre-approved actions that are agreed upon the kind of advancement into the service itself. So once we onboard a customer, we'll agree a series of pre-approved actions whereby they agree for us to do a certain number of actions in the event of a breach is discovered. So we have an SLA within Rackspace Managed Security, and that's when we discover a breach within your environment, you will know about it 30 minutes after we discover it. So when you think about the whole kind of 72-hour breach notification requirement, that's kind of playing within that ballpark figure as well. With regard to the data that is required for the Independent Commissioner's Office and the breach notification form, we'll supply you with a flash report 90 minutes after a breach is detected for customers of the Rackspace Managed Security. So all of these things kind of support you in your case to kind of have a kind of a confident cybersecurity posture. With regards to the reporting, as well as the flash report that's delivered 90 minutes after a breach, we provide reports on a weekly and monthly basis. The weekly reports are a kind of technical snapshot of the missions conducted that week. That's the cyber hunting missions conducted by our professionals in the Security Operations Centre, and the kind of observations and actions that they recommend as a result of their missions. Also contained within the monthly reports is an overview for you, is kind of an insight into your threat landscape, and that's industry specific. So regardless of your industry, we've got a report for you on a monthly basis. We'll give you kind of snapshot, a high level view, kind of holistic overview of the threat landscape within your business sector. See, the benefits and the value, that's kind of an assumption, because we're talking about GDPR today, and that's not even mentioned on my slide here today, but the benefits and the value are all down to you, and I've mentioned some of the features there, and you might be doing your own calculations as to what value that holds for you as an organisation. So I was asked to kind of consolidate a series of points, a kind of checklist of things, top things for you to consider before May the 25th. So the first one you're doing right now, becoming familiar with the GDPR and the potential impact to your business in terms of data protection against the obligations and risks. It's worthwhile organisations kind of holding a mirror up to themselves, asking themselves, do you have the processes in place to be allowing you to fulfil the 72-hour breach notification requirement? Now, as I said, the breach notification form is publicly accessible now, so you can download that from the Independent Commissioner's Office. And also, do you have the solutions in place that allow you to monitor unusual behaviour? So monitoring within a good cybersecurity postured environment is all based on the premise that kind of assume compromise. That's probably the best posture an organisation can have. It's kind of I think it was the chief of the American Defence said it's not if but when, and it's a great kind of quote. And people have been using it for the last 24 months in cybersecurity because it's very true. To assume compromise and be on the alert and putting extra emphasis on monitoring and detection is very much recommended. Also, as I mentioned before, encryption. It's the only technology mentioned within GDPR, so it's down to your organisation to kind of monitor and assess the encryption solutions that you have in place. Also doing those kind of breach discovery, data discovery methods as well, understanding where your personally identifiable information is, seeing if you can consolidate that within the environment and apply strong encryption against that. As I've mentioned, privacy and data protection is something we can assist with as well. So ensuring appropriate measures are in place to protect your customers' personal data includes that as well. So I thought I'd end on a fun bit. I've just been given this by the gentleman to my left. But in the time it takes to digest a steak, the window for the morning after pill, watch the entire series of Game of Thrones. I've done it, probably in 2 sittings. Walk from Amsterdam to Luxembourg, and to complete the Apollo mission, to travel from Earth to the Moon. You can tell me what all these things have in common. Anyone? There's a really flashy Rackspace USB. 72 hours. That's for you. Well done. Congratulations. 72 hours to report a breach to the Independent Commissioner's Office. So that's something worth bearing in mind. Something else worth bearing in mind, this is a very wise man who was in control of a bit of a large country in the West. He said, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. And today we've got 45 working days to the implementation of GDPR. With that, I thank you very much for your time today and hope to speak to you on our stand just down the road there. Thank you very much. So the key security challenges of GDPR within the legislation itself, number 1 is probably the breach notification requirement, which is 72 hours. Not only is it the kind of timescale of the requirement in order for people to report a breach to the Independent Commissioner's Office. It's also the information that needs to be accompanied with that notification to the Independent Commissioner's Office. So the breach notification form has been released by the Independent Commission ICO since around about February time. So organisations need to review their capabilities around not only monitoring but detection, and understand if they're going to have the relevant information available to them within the 72-hour notification requirement laid out within the GDPR. It's a really interesting question. So an organisation cannot 100% avoid being targeted by a cyber criminal. However, there are a number of actions that they can do in order to kind of reduce the ROI of a cyber attacker. So not only do organisations have a return on investment in mind, but also cyber criminals do indeed as well. So when a cyber attacker is targeting an organisation, the harder you make it for them, the least likely it is that they persist. So we're all familiar with the expression APT, the Advanced Persistent Threat. They'll only persist for as long as it's worth their while. So that's dependent on the information they're trying to get in the first place. However, in the case of, say, medical records being the most valuable data asset out there on the dark web, if it's medical records, then the kind of medical institutions that are out there kind of have a big challenge with regard to the legacy systems they need to update on a regular basis. And we're all familiar with the kind of Spectre and meltdown issues that we had with the systems last year that actually struggled to keep updates and patches applied in order to mitigate those risks. So security challenges when adopting the cloud. A lot of organisations struggle with the fundamental fact of it's not about just lifting and shifting the security controls they have in place. A lot of security controls that organisations have are built for kind of more legacy environments, more on-premise environments, and when it comes to the cloud, there's a completely different mentality that needs to be adopted. So kind of people have to have a kind of cloud-centric mentality when migrating to the cloud. Rackspace Managed Security has developed tools such as auto-scaling, for instance, which enables us to kind of auto-scale our monitoring and detection capability into newly spun up instances within the cloud environments, ensuring that no environment of our customers is left unsecured as they grow and expand their business within those environments.